Welcome to The Secret Witch Show, the podcast providing a safe and alchemical altar space of conversations which help powerful women escape a half-hearted, spiritless society and rediscover the freedom of living a wildly magical life. Every other week, we explore how to cast aside the wounds of shame, guilt, and fear connected with fully being yourself, so you can grant yourself permission to stop hiding, ground soulfully back into your body, illuminate your whole soul desires, tend your soul, rediscover and reclaim your powerful gifts, express your magic, and manifest your wildest alchemy. There's no better place to become who your heart longs to be. This is where we will guide you into liberation. I'm your host, Nicole Barton, and I'm so excited to dive in. Welcome, magical ones, and oh my, have I been loving the Manifesting with the Moon gathering recently. I've been really stepping into owning my channeling of the remedies of the wild recently, and if you're in my group, you've probably seen a little bit more about that, but I've been really seeing how my magical ones are often in need of the remedy of phosphorus, which ultimately is what is on the end of a match. And based on the homeopathic principles that like cures like, this makes perfect sense. It's the energy of fire. So my women often will come into the world as dreamy, sensitive, open, radiant, loving, magical, powerful beings. And they have this burning desire to live from soul. And then, as their beautiful feminine sensitivity and openness meets the modern world, this beautiful core is then often layered over with fear as they kind of suppress themselves to fit into mainstream society for fear of being burned at the stake. And in doing so, their unique soul essence becomes suppressed and their life force energy is lost. So I've created a sacred space for our women to gather in our Facebook group, and once a month we come together as I dose you with phosphorus, the remedy of the wild, and help you really to refocus your energy on manifesting and expressing your magic into the world. So if that is calling to you, please do join us for the next Manifesting with the Moon. You can head to our Facebook group to see more about that, or head to our website as well, www.nicolebarton.co.uk/moon-circle. I will see you there. And topically, on The Secret Witch Show today, I'm diving into how magical women often doubt and resist their own magic, leaving them struggling to choose it, which can keep them from walking into the gateway to their possibility and deeper devotion to their souls and their soul's vision. I explore how women often arrive at this path with burning soul desires that require them to alchemize from simply being in hope into coming to know and believe in it being possible for them to actually create what they long to create. So in this episode, we explore how to keep powerfully choosing into the next gateway so you can manifest what your heart longs for, how and why we create material for our liberation and come up against wounds along the way, which requires us to love ourselves enough to stay open and keep choosing it, and how if we do keep choosing into our belief in magic, it becomes inevitable that we become who our soul came here to be. Let's dive in. Welcome, magical ones, to the episode about how to harness magic to grow hope into possibility and belief. And yeah, really this episode has come around because there was a point where a few months ago, I was really seeing how my women can really often struggle to move from, or to be in the place of like hope and possibility. And this is something that at the time I was like, I'm so devoted to soul that I can't even remember or imagine what it was like to not be in that devotion. And I was speaking to my soul guide about it and realizing as I did that that has totally been my journey through these little gateways. So my whole journey with magic has been one of growing from a place of hope into possibility, into belief, and into devotion. And so I thought it'd be really powerful to do an episode on this, especially as it was voted for by you as one of the 3 choices. So you've already harnessed your power to make this episode possible, and to bring it into manifestation, into form. But yeah, it feels like it's a really powerful one for the secret witch, for my women who often can be very much in shadow around possibility. And I'm going to go into that a little bit more in a moment, but I just wanted to start off, just before I started recording, I pulled a card which is the Inanna card from the Divine Feminine Oracle, and she's the queen of heaven and earth, and her soul meditation is I have nothing to hide, I see and accept all that I am. That's her kind of intention of this card. And it says in the book, when your soul selects her card, Inanna goes into the depths of her own unconscious to merge with her twin sister self, and she becomes more powerful because she's no longer using conscious psychic energy to keep her shadow hidden deep underground. And really, that is the work of this path. That is the work of harnessing magic to grow hope into possibility and belief, and eventually into deeper devotion. And this card says that Inanna courageously descends and faces the aspects of herself that are hard to get to when she's fully dressed or cloaked heavily in the ego. And she's an invitation to get naked and drop our defenses and see how holy and sacred it is to be vulnerable. And I think that's the thing, is that often in our kind of modern culture, and I'm going to go into this a little bit deeper in a minute by exploring what's been coming up around my own devotion, is that we can kind of get caught in thinking that the mundane world is the only way to create. And often from the mundane world, it can really look, especially to a secret witch who's not kind of vulnerable and naked and seeing her shadow, it can really look like things aren't possible. It can really look like there's no hope at times. So this is a really, really important exploration that we're going to go into, because ultimately, as the secret witch begins this journey into soul, begins that descent in and that kind of into soul and kind of rising into her witch queen, or elevating into her witch queen, as she begins to do that work, she begins to cultivate a sense of hope and possibility and belief and devotion. And again, it can really look like these are states that actually that's just where we are. Like, we can really feel like we're either hopeful or hopeless, but actually this is about coming to see that we can really learn to harness and grow hope into possibility into belief into devotion. And that's the journey that I've been walking. So I wanted to start off by sharing a little bit about what I've been seeing recently, and this is actually magically all around devotion. So a while back, when I was ill with chronic fatigue syndrome, I had a lot of different healing, but one of the things that healed me mostly was was homeopathy, and that healed me twice in my life. And I remember saying, when I'd healed the second time, or when I was healing the second time, if homeopathy heals me again, then I'm going to devote my life to it. And at the time, I wasn't in the world of magic particularly consciously. I dabbled in magic and played with magic, obviously using homeopathy and all the various witchy things like Reiki and reflexology and all the other witchy things. And I dabbled in it, but I hadn't really learned to harness it as a kind of magical art and science, which actually, again, is what homeopathy is all about. So I didn't realise at the time, when I made this unconscious devotion, where it would lead me. But what I did have was a sense of hope. And again, I'm going to go into that in a moment. But as I've kind of journeyed through learning homeopathy, training in homeopathy, becoming a homeopathic practitioner, and then kind of changing path and going into being a soul guide, I've really begun to see how that has been me moving through these different gateways of hope into possibility, into belief, into devotion. And since making that deeper devotion to my own medicine, which I've done more consciously now, and I'll explore, if you're getting lost with what these different terminologies are, then I'm going to go into just explaining a little bit more around that. So don't worry about that for now. But since I have really kind of more deeply devoted to being my own medicine in the world, I have seen that I'm actually here to channel what I'm now calling the remedies of the wild. And having more and more revealed in that devotion about the ways that I'm bringing homeopathy and that unique medicine into my soul work. And often there can be resistance at that. And often that requires me to choose into seeing what that resistance is and staying open to shaking things up as we know them. And that's how magic is created. So I had a deep realization this week with my own soul guide that my women who are called to this path are usually the energetic of the homeopathic remedy of the world, phosphorus. And that's also my own constitutional remedy. So it makes perfect sense because we're actually here to serve the women who are kind of older versions of us walking that path that we've already walked. So it kind of makes sense. But this was a realization that was so powerful on so many levels, because I realized that my women typically come into the world as their kind of constitutional remedy, if you like, is phosphorus. That's who they come into the world as. And phosphorus as a remedy is very dreamy, sensitive, open, loving, very magical, very powerful, and has this burning desire to live from soul. So if you're listening to this, it's likely that you may resonate with some of that constitution, that being who you were as a child when you were in that innocence of just being you. And this kind of core layer then kind of gets plastered over with all sorts of other shadowy remedy states that have been kind of disconnecting you from your essence and making you doubt your own possibility and not believe in yourself. And just maybe going off on a slight tangent, phosphorus is a mineral that's really reactive, really highly reactive. It's what's on the end of a match. So it kind of burns really brightly and radiantly. It's the powerful creator of fire. And in our remedies of the wild, one of the guiding principles is like cures like, which means basically that whatever remedy we need to take is something that is very similar to the state that we're in. So of course, when we consider that the witch was literally burned at the stake for being herself in times gone by, it makes sense that my women would be healed by the energetic phosphorus or fire as a wild remedy. What it also highlighted was that my women typically have a burning desire, burning fire in their belly, a burning desire to be their luminous, full expression. And often she's also kind of burned herself out trying to fit into a mundane world. But often she struggles to keep choosing that burning desire because she doubts her own possibility. And it kind of makes perfect sense that this remedy would be, this kind of remedy that creates fire would be deeply healing for medicine for my women, given that like cures like. And of course, my women are also witches who are literally here on earth to deal in healing remedies and magic. So, but what happens when their beautiful kind of feminine sensitivity and openness comes into the modern world, they can often become overwhelmed by the mundane disapproval of their magic, or they can fear safety, they can fear losing control, and they suppress their capacity to create fire so that they aren't burned at the stake. So this is them kind of innocently shutting down their possibility in order to fit into mainstream society. And so as that happens, their kind of unique essence, their unique expression, their unique soul expression becomes suppressed and their life force energy is really shut down. So they're shutting down their possibility, they're shutting down their belief. And often they will still be in hope because there's this kind of magical hopefulness about my women, but they can't usually see how they can create what they hope for. So at this point, they usually arrive at my door kind of feeling burned out and longing to take the medicine to reconnect to their soul. And of course, as I mentioned, other remedy states in that meantime will have piled on as they've been living in this mundane world, kind of creating all the shadows, all the stories about their experience in that mundane world. And of course, their soul came here to experience all of that. So our work here is to really dose the remedies of the wild required for our phosphoric witches to return to taking their own medicine and maybe even becoming their own medicine in the world if that is their deeper soul desire, but taking their own medicine first. And yeah, it's just kind of gives me goosebumps to think about how that can kind of ripple out into the world. And it also makes me think about the fact that the only reason that is possible and that medicine is now, I'm able to share that medicine in the world, which is deeply, deeply healing for the world, and it's creating change and transformation in the world, is because I kept choosing possibility, because I've been on that journey of kindling my hope into possibility, into belief, into devotion, which is the journey that I very much take my women on so that they can also learn to keep choosing through those gateways. And of course, and I'm going to go into more into that in a moment, but just to make the point that that's also something that is sometimes not available for my women to choose into. And so I just want to witness that that is also okay. So if you're hearing this and feeling like you're not even in hope, you're feeling hopeless, that is so, so welcome here. You are so loved in that hopelessness. And you too can also keep choosing out of that hopelessness into hope if that is what you long for. So you too can kindle that fire from hopeless into hope, but you have to be able to choose hope in order to walk into this path and be able to rise through into the deeper devotion. And yeah, it really does take us making a choice to kind of lean into the fear with complete love and keep choosing to see it differently. But if you're kind of longing to walk this path, openness to magic, access to hope is required, because without hope, there isn't that openness that is required in order to begin to go deeper. But as I said, before I saw all of this, I was really struggling and had to really dive into this with my soul guide to see that I had made this deeper journey from soul to soul back from way back, like decades ago, even though it was largely unconscious at the time. I'm kind of retrospectively making it a conscious thing. At the time, I was unconsciously doing this, but I still see that there was this burning fire within me, that phosphoric burning fire that had me kindle that for myself. So, and at times, of course, there were times of hopelessness, or I'm going to say helplessness rather than hopelessness, because helpless is one of the shadows of the secret witch, and it's one of the shadows that can be really, again, chosen out of in order to see the possibility. If we're hopeless, it's kind of more it's more a sense of energetically being closed. So that's why I say hope is required, because hope means there's an openness in order to seeing something new. And that is very much required for this path. So to talk a little bit more about the gateways and how they were created, is that I began to see that our gateways really are what help us know if we're ready for the descent to soul. And it's really that kind of rising through the gateways, like walking through these different gateways in order to create. And the gateways are, as I've mentioned, hope, belief, knowing, and devotion. And so there's that kind of to really begin walking the path, there's that hope or belief or knowing of that possibility for magic and power. And yeah, at each level, there will be a desire. There will be that burning desire for whatever it is that's in your soul to be created. It's just that you'll be at a different level of hope, belief, knowing, or devotion. So there's a sense of like, no, just before I began recording, I actually thought it'd be really powerful to just begin to read some of the definitions of these words, because it's helpful to be able to kind of distinguish them and make a distinction between the different gateways. So hope, it said in the dictionary, is all about a feeling of desire and trust that something can happen, as opposed to hopelessness, which is that kind of no hope that there'll be any change at all. And this is why the kind of magical element of this is really, really important. We talked about how to harness magic to grow hope into possibility. Magic is that kind of process of transformation. So yeah, it's that kind of deep capacity to be able to hope is a requirement for magic. So yeah, hope is that feeling of desire and trust that something can happen. Belief is kind of deeper. It's like an acceptance that something is true. And magically, the definition said, especially without proof. So it's like a belief is something that doesn't necessarily need proof, but there's this real kind of cultivation of trust and faith in something, even if there's no evidence for it. Which again, magic is really all the stuff that is unknown, that hasn't yet got evidence to prove it. So this feels quite significant as we're kind of harnessing magic into hope, belief, possibility and devotion. The knowing, or the possibilities, it's really the knowing of the possibility, is being aware of something that may happen or may be the case. And again, quite magically, the definition of this in the dictionary said that it's being aware of something that may happen or may be the case that is secret or known only to a few, which is quite interesting, given that, again, magic is that kind of, it's almost like something that is not really fully known, or it's quite I want to say it's like known only to a few is exactly what sums up about magic. It's not the mundane, it's not the mainstream, it's not the mundane. And so there's this, again, this gateway of knowing of the possibility, like being aware of something that may happen, may be the case. And then the next gateway is devotion. So this is when we've arrived at a place that is like this deep love and loyalty and worship of something deeper. So it's kind of moving through those different gateways. You can see that hope is that kind of trust, that feeling of desire that something can happen. Belief is like an acceptance that it can happen, even though if we don't know how. The knowing of the possibilities, being aware that it may happen. And the devotion is like really like worshipping, loving that something deeper, kind of like a not even having to choose, it's just inevitable. And this isn't specifically in context to you believing in yourself as such, or the path, or me, but it's about you rising into through the ranks of hoping, believing, knowing of the possibility, and devoting to your soul. And this is very important because this is about really allowing your soul to be seen as like being able to trust in your soul, being able to believe in your soul, being able to know the possibility of your soul, and being able to devote to your soul. And as I said earlier, it can also often feel like these things are just states that we find ourselves in. But actually, as with everything, we're always creating. So we're ultimately unconsciously choosing whichever one we're in, even if it's hopelessness, we're actually already creating that for ourselves, because there is always the possibility to move into the next gateway. And the more and more we choose that, the more evidence is informed for that. And you might be wondering, well, why is that even important? So I'm going to go into that as well. But yeah, just to really make the point there is that we are always choosing. So we can create the movement through each of these gateways through alchemy. And this is done by really identifying where you are first and foremost. So I'm going to give some examples of the ways that this might show up in the phrases and things that you say. And beginning to identify where you are, where you want to go, i.e. what's the next gateway that you want to go through, what is it that you're here to create, and what's in the way of you creating it that way. So for example, some phrases that people might say at each point of this gate, just so that we can begin to see where we're at and where we want to go, is that hopeless may say things like, oh, there's just no hope that I can change. That's an example of someone who's feeling hopeless. Now with hope, there's kind of two different ways that hope can show up. And that is kind of, and I've talked about this in my feminine mystery group with my women, because there's this sense of, there's often a hope against, which is where some of my women often are, but there's also a hope for. So hope against will show up in the way that we're kind of hoping to not have whatever it is that we don't want. So for example, it could be, I hope I don't feel ill forever. I don't want to be burdened or burned out. Hope for is something that is what my women tend to be invited into working with, because there's again, magically, we always speak, every word we speak is a spell. So we want to start creating in a way that is hope for what we want to create. So the hope against is kind of rebelling against what we don't want. The hope for is where we will begin to kind of hope for what we actually want, what we actually desire, that burning desire. So hope for would look like, I hope I could feel better. I hope I can be in radiant health. I want this. These are examples, again, of phrases that might indicate where you are on this scale. For the examples of belief, these could be examples of things like, I could be well, I could be in radiant health, I could have a thriving business. So this is moving into like for what you could have. And that sense of like, I could have this, not I hope, but I could. Like, this is possible. And again, like that knowing of possibility is like a real knowing of like, I know I desire this, I long for it, it is possible, and despite the fear, I'm going to take action on fulfilling it. So again, it's that like really knowing that there's a possibility in order to be able to take the aligned actions here in this phase. And then the final part of it is that devotion. And at this point, the kind of phrase that somebody might say who's devoted is like, I'm all in. I long for this no matter what comes up. This is the way that I live and nothing else makes sense to me. And again, as you are journeying through this kind of cultivation of all of this so that you can create your soul's vision, it will also be likely that you'll kind of move in and out of these different phases as you meet your edge. So when you're meeting something that's particularly edgy, it may be that you go right back down to hope for, even if you were in belief or knowing of what's possible. And that is absolutely perfect. It's a sign of expansion. So just be conscious that you might notice what's your tendency to be, where your tendency to be is. And there's still capacity for you to go up and down within that and move in and out of these. But overall, you'll be somewhere more consistently than the other places. And of course, the thing to know is that you will grow and expand into these higher levels as you journey. So again, like if you're in hope against, know that there's potential for you to expand into hope for. If you're in hopeless, know that there is potential for you to expand into hope. If you're in hope and you want to be in devotion, know that there is a potential for you to expand into devotion via belief and knowing as you journey through. But what it does require, and this is where the hard part is, because I wish there was a straightforward, easy way of just choosing this for you, of allowing you to rise into these levels, is it just requires for you to be able to choose that. And that is particularly challenging because at each point we will get sent tests. We will get sent material for our liberation. I don't know if I've talked to that too much on these episodes, but ultimately material for liberation is all the stuff that arises as we've made that choice into whatever it is that's part of our soul vision. So we'll if we've chosen into something, we might get things that come up to test how hopeful we are, how much possibility we see, how much devotion we have to our work, and that is because we kind of create this by our choosing, so that we can then rise into and up level into the next level. So the reason for that being important is that as we get the material for liberation, it reveals and illuminates all the places where we're being kept small, where we are being kept in those lower levels and not expanding into who we came here to be. Now, just to put that into some context, I'm just going to put my journey into those different layers, if you like. So when I was ill with chronic fatigue syndrome, when I was just early 20s, the second time, I remember that example better than when I was 10. But there was that real sense of, I remember deeply rejecting the label of being ill. So I suspect at that point I was in that hope against, like, I really don't want to be ill. I really hope that I'm not going to be ill forever. And at some point that must have then kind of moved into a hope that I can heal. And then going back to that kind of that deeper sense of like, I could be healed if homeopathy works again, I'll devote my life to it, was that moving into belief, moving into that that acceptance that it could be true that I could heal, even if there wasn't any proof for that, because the doctors would not have believed that homeopathy would work. But I had this sense of belief of like, I could be healed here. If homeopathy works again, I'll devote my life to it. And then that moved into the knowing of possibility. And I kind of had this sense of like, wow, now I've seen that homeopathy worked. I know it works. Therefore, I'm going to train in it. Despite all the fear that brings up, I knew that I was being called to train in homeopathy. There's this real soul calling of like, this is where you need to be. You need to go to London and train in homeopathy. And it made really not very much sense to me, other than it was perhaps another witchy modality that I was going to offer because I was a complementary therapist. But it kind of was taking me off on a tangent away from the therapist that I trained in, away from my business, which was in Warwickshire at the time. It was taking me 2 hours away to ultimately live in London when I was married and lived in Warwickshire and had my family there, and it was a full-time course in London. So despite all of those potential like barriers to me actually training in homeopathy, I knew that I was meant to go there by this burning desire to do it. And that wasn't, at that point, I suspect if I had been in like hope still, that wouldn't have been available to me to choose that. I suspect if I still only had that belief, didn't have that belief that homeopathy worked, again, I wouldn't have been able to choose it. So it's that real knowing that homeopathy works and I'm going to train in it despite the fear. That kind of, like, I could have this, the possibility being being aware of something that was possible. And then the deeper level of devotion comes in. So again, like, I had that deep longing to be my medicine in the world. So at this point now, having trained in homeopathy years ago and seeing all that's been seen about who I'm here to be, I had this a deeper sense of like devoting to my soul. So I've been in the work of devoting to soul and only really now seen how this makes sense and pieces together, is that although it made no sense to train in homeopathy from where I was at the time, that actually has allowed me to express who I came here to be. Like, my soul came here to express homeopathy. That is my gift, and to dose women not via remedies, but by energetic medicine, via the truth that I speak. So I'm bringing homeopathy to the world in a way that's quite innovative and different. And kind of dosing remedies in a different way that is particularly my unique medicine. And now I see that absolutely nothing else makes sense. This is just how I see the world. So from a place of my devotion now, it's kind of a choiceless choice. It's who I've come here to be, and that is who I'm devoted to being. So there's no kind of doubt or hope or hopelessness or lack of belief or lack of knowing. Like, it's just a devotion. This is just who I've come here to be. And as I said, we'll kind of get tests for this. There's this kind of material for our liberation to test how hopeful we are, how much possibility we see, how much knowing we have, how much devotion we have. And our work in this path is to keep walking through all of that so that we can kind of up level to the next gateway. We can walk through the next gateway. The more devoted we become, the more we will reap the benefits. And again, another example of this is in how I have built my business. And for example, just to go back to the homeopathy example, the material for liberation for me is that I have created my business around archetypes, and yet my deeper conscious devotion to homeopathy, since I've made it a conscious devotion, although I made it initially unconsciously, I've since made it a conscious devotion. That devotion to homeopathy has made it crystal clear. More has been revealed about that I'm meant to be teaching around the healing remedies of the feminine medicinal witch instead of through archetypes. And so although the secret witch and the witch queen archetypes will likely stay, because these are central to my work, these are really powerful in terms of who my women are, in terms of being witches and that kind of rising into the power and magic, there will be the deeper remedies of the witch that will become the medicine that I dose to my women along the path. And each woman that comes to work with me has her own unique remedy that wants to be taken and possibly expressed into the world. And having said that, that's not an easy choice to make. So it will take a deeper level of devotion for me to choose the disruption, the ruptures involved in me fully becoming my medicine. And we get that by rising through the energetic upgrades at each gateway, by upgrading our frequency and going into the material for our liberation at each phase and choosing through it. So, for example, that will require a lot of me to choose to disrupt my business in a way that makes me have to frame everything around my medicine instead of how I've been doing it previously. But that devotion will be rewarded. So this is usually how material for liberation works. And again, for another example, was that I might have had to choose through going back to the basic levels, I might have had to choose through my hopefulness of getting better in chronic fatigue. I had to keep choosing to believe that it might be possible to heal, and had to keep choosing to come back to that over and over each time I doubted it, each time I didn't think that it was possible to heal. And this again is part of that magic, that choosing into the possibility, choosing to open our hearts, be vulnerable, and be in that fear of things not happening. Each time we want to contract and our bodies want to tense up and want us to stop. Each time we go into doubt, each time we fall out of hope and possibility, we have to choose back in. And again, I had to choose from hope to possibility to belief when I started creating my business, and really felt that it was impossible to create what I wanted to create. And I began to see the evidence as I kept choosing through these different gateways. I began to see the evidence to inform my confidence that I could create it. But this was a constant choosing over and over and over again to look for, where is there hope, where is there possibility, or whatever the next gateway was. So when we're in that darkness of we really want to evade it, we really want to get away from it over and over again, we have to choose to open, to see, to reveal all the places we still don't see hope, possibility, belief, devotion, until we do. Because eventually we will have expanded past the shadows that keep us away from our soul vision, and we'll be able to see them, love them, and that eventually it will become easier. And our work is still our work. It's not going to be over. We'll have more expansion. Our deeper devotions will become even deeper devotions with their own version of material for liberation as we expand into the fullness of who we came here to be. And still, the stuff that we found really impossible one time, just as where I am now, I would have found all sorts of things that I've created impossible. We just have to keep choosing it, and our shadow will do everything it can to stop us from choosing it, because it will feel unsafe to choose it. It will throw feelings of not being safe, of not being in control, of not being approved of, and all of it is sent as a test. It's not even sent, we create it. We actually create all of it as a test to see how burning our desire is, as a way of also illuminating what's in the way of us creating that burning desire. And I have had women choose out of the path at this point because their hope and possibility wasn't strong enough. Their desire wasn't strong enough. And all of this is so welcome, and still it won't create your desires. So again, we go here with complete love for wherever you are at. But to be able to harness magic, to grow hope into possibility, into belief, into devotion, you need to have a rock solid vision that feels deeply true, deeply yours, and that feels a little bit edgy, but also helps you to cultivate your hope into possibility, into belief, into devotion. So the first thing is being able to love ourselves in that enough to open. And just going back to the opening, it's about that kind of really seeing that this is in Anna's invitation to get naked, to drop our defences, to see how holy and sacred it is to be vulnerable. And actually, I've just seen it says, as above, so below. This is an alchemical adage that suggests heaven and earth are not so separate. So within us, deep down in the dark cages where we place parts of ourselves, the truths that exist there also exist right here on the surface of our everyday lives. So for exerting great amounts of energy to keep from seeing our shadow, it's actually playing a large role in our conscious life. And what this means is that it's all happening anyway. We're always getting this material for liberation. It's just that when we make it conscious, we begin to look into that painful darkness and see why we are stuck in possibility, or stuck in hope, or stuck in hopelessness. So that is the reason why we're creating this material for liberation, and we're going into it consciously, is that we need to love ourselves to be able to illuminate that shadow that's in the way and start to see that we are the creatrix, the powerful creatrixes of it all. And as you love yourself, you'll be able to love yourself more in your shadows. And that is the deep work in this part. That is the deepest of deep work. But as you do that, as you begin to open your heart, as you begin to love yourself, as you begin to allow yourself to go into the darkness of what is stopping you cultivate hope, possibility, belief and devotion, you'll have more revealed to you about your shadows, about your soul's deep and true desires, about your vision, about who you're here to be. And of course, as you see more and more about that, again, fear will start to creep in. That's the point, that you're required to choose. Is this what I deeply desire? What are the costs of not creating that burning desire? And what are the benefits of creating that burning desire? And at each point, you're choosing back into hope, back into possibility, back into belief. And it sounds so simple. I really can't put into words like how difficult this work is. Often my women will really they'll be like, yeah, I know it's difficult. And then they'll get to it and be like, this is really difficult. It's like, yeah, this work is really difficult because we are choosing past all the places, all the parts of us that just don't see it as possible, that just want to sink into hopelessness instead of hope, that want to just avoid having to cultivate that possibility for ourselves. But I can promise you, the more you do, the more worth it is. The more gateways we walk through, it's just inevitable that we will keep walking through them, and there's absolutely no turning back. For me to think about turning back now would just be I couldn't even imagine it. And this is how we create our soul vision. This is how we see our soul vision in the first place, as we're in the early stages of that hope. And it's what has us just create whatever is in our hearts, who we've come here to be, who we've come here to be. So at each point, that choosing back into hope, choosing back into possibility, choosing back into belief is us choosing our soul's vision. And we do it by becoming generative instead of degenerative. So this is something that my own soul guide talks about, is that being generative, by choosing to be willing and open-hearted enough to trust ourselves to take the leap and land on our feather bed. There's a great quote that I'm sure I've read before about that by Terence McKenna. He talks about, this is how magic is done. We have to step out and trust that we're going to land on our feather bed. And that is how we grow hope into possibility and belief, by keep choosing that, by keep getting evidence to inform our confidence that this is possible. And by looking to hope, always by looking to possibility when we don't feel it, by looking to belief when we don't know it, by looking to devotion when we come up against our challenges. But we begin to know that what is in our souls is non-negotiable to create. And we love ourselves there, and we keep coming back to our vision and the why we've chosen this work to become who we really are. And for the Secret Witch, just to bring this back to where you're at, where you likely are as a secret witch who doubts her own power and magic. That's generally the patterns of my women. That's generally where I've been, and where I am now is in that kind of devotion to power and magic, that knowing of power and magic is possible. But for the secret witch who doesn't know her own power and magic, that is a real challenge. And that's why it's so important to presence it, because I am here to hold you in that. Often my women will feel this deep sense of shame about having fear, this deep sense of shame around not being able to choose. And I just want to illuminate that that is something to be loved about yourself. That is something to innocently love, that little girl in you who just doesn't want to choose that because it's safer to stay where she is. She is so loved. And that is so, that if that's all you can take away from this episode today, that is the most important thing. And that is why, the secret witch who doesn't know her power and magic, that can be a real challenge. The very wounds that hold her back from her power and magic are the not knowing of them, and that power and magic is there. It's just she can't see it, and so it shuts down that hope and possibility. So this is why the path is so valuable for the secret witch, because without the guidance, she likely won't be able to see the shadowy patterns that hold her back from her possibility, belief, and devotion. So if you're sitting here kind of resonating with this, but also being well, I don't know how, just seeing this is powerful itself. The witch especially needs the remedy of the wild pulsatilla. Pulsatilla is one of my women's deep shadows, and again, shadow being so innocent. Pulsatilla is this real helpless state. So we talked about helpless instead of hopeless is absolutely welcome. And helplessness can really be the shadow that has my women particularly deeply in their lack of possibility and belief. That kind of sense of lack of power really stops my women being in their power, and yet it is her power creating her lack of power. She's her power to create these big stories is what has her doubt her own power and magic. There's typically always a shadow in the way of the secret witch's very devotion that she requires to create what she longs for. And without this deep remedy of pulsatilla, she will largely keep coming back to feeling helpless to create possibility and belief. And pulsatilla, of course, being that helplessness remedy, which if you're in the work with me, you'll know a bit more about likely. But the deepest work really is to begin to see this and begin to love this about yourself, if that is you. So this kind of helplessness shadow, not hopelessness, helplessness shadow can be one of the ways that my women can innocently shut down hope and possibility and belief. And that shadow is there really to try and keep you safe. Keep you safe. That is one of its ways that it tries to keep you safe. And One of the most powerful and loving actions you can take to begin the process of growing hope into possibility and belief and devotion is to just notice how that shadow of helplessness, which will show up by kind of being like, oh, you can't create that, it's not possible. Noticing how hope and possibility and belief are shut down innocently by your shadow is the most loving action you can begin to take. And so I invite you to just spend some time really witnessing. I'm going to invite you into some questions as a noticing practice over the next week or so. Just begin to notice, which gateway are you at? Are you in hope against, hope for, possibility, belief, devotion? Where are you? Which gateway are you waiting at in that process? And where are you shutting down each of those? The hope, the possibility, the belief, the devotion. Where are you shutting those down, each gateway? And why? What is the deeper fear that is surfacing for you in moving through all of those? And then the final question is, will you love yourself there so you can keep choosing past that fear? And just to bring it back to magic, because this is about how to harness magic to grow hope into possibility and belief. The work of magic is that of transformation, and it's done via alchemy. So we talk about alchemy here a lot. It's the path of living your wild alchemy. Alchemy is that process of turning lead into gold. And one of my feminine mystery women asked me this week why we call it alchemy. And really, it is because that is the process here. The process of magic is that of creating alchemical transformation. And traditionally, alchemy is about transmuting lead into gold. And in this path, we talk about transmuting or alchemizing darkness into gold. And the darkness is what we were talking about earlier, that kind of shadow, that fear. And often as we go into those shadows, those fears, we will, well, not often, always, there is gold waiting in them. So there's always something to be seen in the darkness, in any resistance we have, in the fear we have, in the avoidance we have, in the triggers we have. It can be so tempting to just project those onto someone else, or just avoid looking at them, or whatever we want to do, like whatever is typical for us. We often will push away the darkness, especially as secret witches, because we don't know our power to alchemize it. And yet we have to be open and willing to see that darkness in order to be able to see the shadow that stops us from being in hope, possibility, belief, and devotion. So we can begin to love all that shows up, whether that's self-doubt, whether that's fear of disapproval, whether that's not feeling safe, whatever it is. Like, all of it is our material for liberation in order for us to begin to kindle our deeper devotion to who we've come here to be. And as we love the shadows that stop us not choosing to go deeper into that, and we walk through the gateways to our soul, we begin to have more revealed about them so that we can choose differently, and we can reclaim the gold in the darkness. So for example, if we doubt our power, it's because there is power there to doubt. If we feel we aren't magical, it's because there is magic there longing to be claimed. And really, that's what this whole path is about. It's about beginning to see that there is gold in our darkness. There is gold in our shadows. And we can also see more and more about that the more we grow from hope into possibility, into belief, into devotion. And our wounds really want to be alchemized into gold so that we can express fully who we came here to be, so that we can be the fullness of our soul. And so, yeah, we harness magic by alchemizing the darkness into gold and starting to look at all the shadows that are stopping us from even being in hope, possibility, or belief, which are all required to have love brought to them first, so that you can deepen and expand into this path. And these are the places to look first, because these are the places that stop us really from seeing our power to create, that stop us seeing our magic. These are the first parts to be able to look at. So I'm going to leave it there, and I deeply invite you into that noticing practice. We often can really underestimate the power of noticing, and just really even just answering the question, like, what is stopping me from hoping? What is stopping me from seeing the possibility? What is stopping me from believing in this being possible, in me being my soul, in my soul's vision being created? All of that, just as a noticing practice, is so valuable. And I invite you as well to pop into our group. If you're listening and you're not yet in the Secret Witch Circle Facebook group, I am always around in there, as is our connection creatrix Beth, to welcome you in any of your illuminations that have come up from this podcast or from any of the other episodes, whatever is coming up for you. We always explore around a theme, and in fact I believe that possibility was a theme, I think, last month actually, and I know this month is self-love, so yeah, perfect themes to be able to explore all of that, of course, magically. So yeah, if you've got any questions, I would love also to receive those, and I'm happy to speak to those live in the group, whether by a live or via message. So yeah, just jump in and join us, and as you begin to journey deeper into growing hope, into possibility and belief, I look forward to holding you in our loving space. So I'm going to leave it there. And just to end with a reiteration of Inanna's card, that her soul voice meditation is, can I love my shadow as much as my light? I'm going to leave it there. And yeah, catch you soon. Well, that was a magical episode. My takeaways are: often secret witches who doubt their magic and power will have a burning desire and longing that is sabotaged by us choosing out of cultivating hope, belief and knowing of what's possible. And we can heal this by becoming our own remedy, rather than thinking we have to wait for hope and possibility to arrive to us. Discovering that we can cultivate it ourselves is revolutionary. To know our own capacity to create even hope is powerful. There are some gateways to walk through, and it starts with cultivating hope. Then when you've got that, you move to cultivating belief and knowing of the possibility. And eventually that creates a deeper devotion to soul and your own magic. You can usually spot which level you're in by noticing the phrases that you say. For example, I hope I can heal versus I know I can heal. At each gateway, we'll get sent tests, our material for liberation, to choose into a deeper level of commitment to our visions. And this is really our initiation into the next gateway, at which point we're asked to keep choosing to cultivate possibility. It's an up-leveling of our possibility. And we have to choose whether we really want to commit to that burning desire or not choose it. And either way, we are choosing something. The secret witch will innocently struggle with this because one of her key shadows is helplessness, which she's learned so innocently as a childhood pattern, and which stops her seeing the possibility until she learns to love that about herself. Really, it's all about choosing past that helplessness fear in order to become generative, which is the key to magic, seeing the possibility instead of lack. If you'd like to get the show notes and links for everything we've chatted about in this episode, head to www.secretwitch.co.uk. If you know a secret witch who would love this episode, please share with them to help them liberate themselves. And so you don't miss out on next week's episode, head to your podcast app of choice and hit subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time.